Hey, it's Laura. If you're listening to this, you're not hearing the complete, unedited version of this conversation. If you want in on that, you can get it by becoming a TMST Plus member. Just head over to our website at tmstpod.com and click support. All right, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, it's Laura. Okay, so who has heard or said the phrase, it's not always about you? Ugh, that kind of hypersensitivity and, let's be honest, self-absorbed worldview is so common. I fall into it far more often than I'd like to admit. Today, I'm talking to Veronica Valli about what's underneath that perception, that everything in life is personal, and why it's not only a painful way to live, but how it causes a hell of a lot of unnecessary drama in our lives. In addition to being a dear friend, Veronica is a woman in long-term recovery, a therapist, a sobriety coach, founder of the Soberful program, a host of the Soberful podcast, and the author of 3 books, the most recent of which, Soberful: Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol, will be published on January 25th in the new year. For me, Veronica has been one of the most steady, sane, helpful voices when it comes to that murky topic of emotional sobriety. So in the conversation, we get into how emotional sobriety does and doesn't relate to abstinence from substance or process addictions, what emotional sobriety actually means, and why it's something everyone has to do, not just people in recovery, if they want healthy relationships. Because no matter what, as Veronica says, the hardest thing any human being has to do is deal with other people. Veronica has genuine encouragement to share about the comfort and relief that comes from living an integrated life. And as happens every time we talk, after this conversation, I felt more grounded, clear, and hopeful. I hope you enjoy it. It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you and be connected.
So I want to talk today about emotional sobriety. And it's this weird thing that I remember hearing it for the first time and I knew that, that's probably important, but I had no idea what it meant. And it's hard to define. It's hard for me to define, but I know I've heard you talk about it, and I'm wondering if you can tell us, what is emotional sobriety?
Yeah, it's a great kind of conversation that keeps deepening. And it's a really ongoing conversation. And the same. I knew what getting sober meant, kind of. Like, I knew that was stopping drinking and drugs and all that kind of stuff. Then I came across emotional sobriety, and it kind of like got under my skin, because I think I knew I didn't have it, and I knew it was really important. And it's the deal. It's emotional sobriety is the work that we need to do when we stop drinking. And I'll give you my definition of it. Emotional sobriety is 2 things. It is feeling comfortable in our own skin, and it's having appropriate emotional responses to events. And that's kind of like when you first get sober, and depending what methods you use, you hear a lot that this, we never get done with this work. We do this forever. And when I heard that, I was like, well, that sucks. Like, I just want to graduate. Like, everyone just wants to graduate from sobriety, right? They want to do the thing and then I want to graduate and get on with my life. And what they're really talking about is personal development, which doesn't ever stop. Personal development doesn't ever stop because all human beings are growing. But I want people to know in sobriety, there is a land that we get to, And that's the land of feeling comfortable in our own skin and having appropriate emotional responses to events.
Let's first talk about, what does unsober behavior look like, or emotionally unsober?
It's when we take everything personally. I feel like we all go through this phase, when I first stopped drinking, it's like I didn't have any skin. I was very sensitive and I could be devastated by, like, we had plans on Friday to do something fairly casual, and then Thursday night you cancel. I could be quite devastated by that, which is an inappropriate, like, I was so sensitive. It's like extreme sensitivity. And I think it's taking everything personally. I think the reverse of that is the filter system that we see the world is everything is about me. Everything you do and you say and what you just shared about and the action that you just took was all about me. Something about me. I just make everything about me. It feels really true. Like, when you canceled the plans, well, that's because Laura's this and she's that and she's blah, 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 blah. And she, whatever. And I make up this whole story in my head and it feels really true. It just feels like it's gospel. That I think is unsober.
Yeah. And everyone knows what that feels like, or I definitely know what that feels like. Why do we take things personally like that?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a defining characteristic of alcoholism. And I use the word alcoholism to refer to the spiritual condition of alcoholism, not really the drinking part. There's some really defining personality characteristics, and this taking things personally. My best guess is we do that because in childhood we weren't role modeled or didn't learn skills that we needed to navigate life, like to have boundaries and things like that.
Building on that, not learning the appropriate coping skills, I think that it's shame. There's a sense of shame underneath it. And if shame says that there's something wrong with me, in this weird way, it becomes like the spotlight's on you all the time. Like you're going to do everything you can to prove that subconsciously. You treat me this way because I'm a piece of shit. And everyone knows it. It's almost this obsession with with how broken you are and how, and this need to feel secure when you can't. You don't have that security.
Yeah, and we create a filter system that we construct in childhood based on our experiences, and that's the filter system that we perceive the world by. All sobriety is it, and I'm talking like sobriety from substances, it's really two things. It's a shift in perception. And we get that shift in perception through consistency. And that sounds like not a big thing, but the shift in perception is everything because it shifts this filter system. So I'll give an example of this. I remember when I was dating my husband, and maybe we'd been together less than a year, I don't know, still pretty new. And we had plans for a Friday night date. I think we were going to go for dinner. I don't think it was anything massive, whatever. And he called very last minute and said, there's this thing on at the college. I really need to go to a speaker. I'm really sorry. Can we postpone? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, no, I get it. No problem. Found myself, loose end. And I think I recall going to a meeting that I really loved and we saw each other Saturday, had a lovely weekend.
You were sober at this point.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I was like 7 years sober. And I remember come the Sunday night, I thought I had that moment where I was like, oh my God, what used to happen in that scenario was canceling a date with me at the last minute meant that you didn't love me. So I would punish you all weekend. I would be distanced and aloof, but I would not specifically say what I felt. I would just, my behavior would be very off, that communicated to you that you needed to kind of grovel or turn cartwheels to make that up to me so that I felt better, and I would ruin our whole weekend. And I had this moment where I was like, I didn't do that. And I didn't even think of doing that. I was like, you know, maybe if we'd had theatre tickets to a great show, I'd have probably been more disappointed. But it wasn't about me. I totally got it. I did something else. We had a lovely time. And that's what I mean about the shift in perception. And that is everything. I've ruined so many relationships like that in the past.
Oh, yeah. Shift in perception changes every single thing that you do, say, encounter, every relationship. When you were talking about that, it strikes me, and I want to say this in the kindest way, but it strikes me as just this very immature view. Because kids think that. Kids are naturally self-centered. They think that they really can't differentiate at a certain point. I suppose another way to say it is nothing is personal, like in one of the 4 agreements. So explain, if nothing's personal, because I want to give an example of kind of push on this a little bit. Say your husband said he was going to cancel plans with you, and you were fine with that. But then what you found out later was that he went out with another woman. So he lied to you. Where does emotional sobriety come into that? And how would we see something like that as not personal?
So that's an interesting question. So I would, if that had happened, of course, an appropriate emotional response to that would be to be hurt, to be disappointed, to be angry. Those are appropriate emotional responses to that event. Yep. What we don't want to do is stay stuck in that. And an emotional, sober response to that would be all of those feelings, and you have revealed to me who you are. And that is devastating. I believed you to be someone else, and now you have shown me who you are, and I will believe who you are. There's no rationalization or explanation for this. This is sad. This is unfortunate. And Laura, to be honest, your fucking loss.
Well, right. Then there's that. Yeah. But nothing in there, nothing in what you said is, this is about me because there's something wrong with me.
Yes. And again, that's the interpretation I always used to make. Oh my God, he did that because I wasn't thin enough, pretty enough, good enough, whatever. Instead, I would see that as like, that is so sad because we had such a nice thing going on here. And clearly you have some stuff going on where like lying and being deceitful and something about you need to have attention from women. Like, I'm glad I saw this now. That's about you. And you know, again, I wouldn't like skip off like an hour later. I would be hurt and crushed and disappointed and angry for a little bit of time. And I would move through that. I would take that away and probably work on that and look at like, okay, so why did I not see that earlier?
Right. And is this a pattern?
Yes.
Have I done this before? So back to just the baseline of emotional sobriety, does it have anything to do with abstinence from substances or drugs or process addictions?
I'm going to have to say yes. I think you can be emotionally sober and still drink alcohol. It's about the abuse factor. Right. Because going back to what you were saying about that this behavior is actually very childish, that you're right. When people stop drinking, we are very raw and childlike in our emotions, and we're emotional teenagers. And the reason for that is we have very quickly defaulted to alcohol as the fixer of anything that's unpleasant or uncomfortable or difficult. So we haven't developed skills to deal with frustration, anger, disappointment, blah, blah, blah. We have just used alcohol as the solution to those things. widely speaking, emotional sobriety takes up bandwidth. And so we need all of our bandwidth. And also the other thing is the consequences of emotional sobriety are so rewarding that what chemicals can bring me just really pales, like it's not like it pales into insignificance compared to what I can create organically. So why would I bother with a toxic substance?
Yeah. Is honesty part of emotional sobriety?
For sure, right? I mean, for sure. And honesty, I think, is evolving, you know? Do you know what Johari's window is?
Yeah. Explain it though.
So Johari's window, you kind of need a visual, but it's basically, if you imagine a rectangle that's divided up into 4 squares, and we have, this is what I call process work. This is the journey of sobriety. Is all 4 squares are about self-awareness. So we all have, the first square would be known to self, known to others. So for us, it would be like, I know you're in recovery. I know you're a mom. I know you're a writer, blah, 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 blah. Then the next square would be known to self, but not known to others. So that might be like years ago when you really wanted to write a book, but you weren't going to talk about it. You know, right. You knew it, but you weren't telling people that, for example. And we all have things that we don't talk about because for various feelings, various reasons. Some of it's shame, fear, all of that kind of stuff. Then we have another box, which is known to others, but not known to self, which is always interesting. And we all have people in our lives where, oh, if so-and-so comes along, you know, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. But they can't see it. But we have things that we can't see in ourselves. So my best friend,
spots.
Yes, blinds, basically our blind spots. That's it. And then we all have, the last corner is not known to self, not known to others. And that's, and the work of being human is to shrink 3 of those boxes down to as small as possible. So we are known to self, known to others, which is about transparency. That doesn't mean, like, we still have privacy. We still we still need privacy. But that's growth. That's.
But you're not hiding anything.
Yes.
You're not keeping secrets.
Yeah. When the other box is like out of balance, you know, that's when we're living dual lives. Like how we show up in the world is very different to who we are inside, for example.
I don't think you have to have a visual. It's very easy to see those 4 aspects of Johari's window. And if you think about the one field, the one square expanding to fill the rest, I always think of there's one version of me. There's just one version of me in the world. Yeah. And it's not that everyone gets the same version, and tons of people don't know, most people don't know a lot about me, but I'm not keeping anything from them. It's just a matter of, like you said, privacy. I choose to, because you don't want intimacy with everybody, but that doesn't mean you're not going to think something that's so outrageously wrong about me, you know, because I present, as opposed to drinking. When I was drinking, it was so much unknown to self and unknown to others.
Yeah. And that's when we're lost. That's when we've lost ourselves.
So let's talk about like emotions. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about emotional sobriety. So people get on these, when we are, especially in the first year of sobriety, we have these powerful energies of emotion often come up and out. And, you know, our hormones are regulating, our brains realigning, I suppose, or it's, I always think of it as becoming unthawed. You're just kind of thawing out. And it feels like this, it almost feels like you're being attacked, like this onslaught of energy and emotion, and that you're just kind of riding a roller coaster. I want to ask from a certain angle, like this can be scary for people who are around you when you're experiencing these highs and lows. And it can put it can cause people to feel like they can't really trust you, or maybe that you're just unpredictable. So what do people who are going into their first year of sobriety, or the people who live with them or around them, need to think about as they're going through this rebalancing process, recalibration process, that I think it's the first sort of part of emotional sobriety?
I think in the first year of sobriety, it's just about finding your feet and creating a foundation. We are so all over the place, aren't we? I mean, I can look back. I mean, the stuff I used to come out with,
I know.
It's that rawness, it's like going back into the world as a newborn baby, but in an adult body, and just feeling so utterly clueless how to navigate and be in the world. And my brain keep wanting to default to alcohol to fix it. I'm not going to do that, but not knowing how do I fix this? I mean,
yeah.
I felt, and I know a lot of people I work with have felt like this. It's just like we're so vulnerable.
So how do you think about emotions? Like, what's a helpful way to look at emotions?
Mm-hmm. Emotions are programmed into us. They're in our DNA. And there's some debate about them, but it's like fear, for example, is programmed into our DNA. We wouldn't live if we didn't have fear, because fear forces us to make life-saving decisions.
Right.
Disgust, I think, is another one. Joy, anger. And there's a debate about a couple more, but they're all, right. Those are emotions. And the thing is about emotions is we feel them physically in our bodies. They are physical sensations that trigger thoughts. And there's a sort of circuit then between thoughts and emotion and these emotions that we experience in our bodies. So they feed off of each other. The fear or the anger gets more intense, and then the thoughts will get more intense. But the thoughts will get more intense, and that actually triggers more of a physical response. Feelings are our subjective response to the emotions. So if you were at work and you knew that a lot of people were going to get fired, and you could be one of them, the appropriate emotional response would be to feel fear, maybe anger as well. Yeah. And you would feel that in your body. The feelings you have about that, for example, this always happens to me. I just know I'm going to, like, my boss doesn't like me. My wife's going to leave me. Those are subjective feelings based on your history, your personal experience, your limiting beliefs that are responding to that emotion that you're experiencing.
Starting out, these emotions can feel very overwhelming. How do you look at them or help people work with those energies? I want to give people some idea of how to work with those emotional energies.
So this is one of the most helpful tools that I have found, and it's very simple. So observe yourself with curiosity, not judgment. So observe what's happening in your body, I'm having a response here, whatever it is. I think it's anger, it might be fear, it might be both, whatever. And then ask yourself the question, what is the story I'm telling myself about this? That's the most powerful tool that I have found, in that it just, and because there's a real pull, there's a real pull with those physical and the thoughts. And that question kind of cuts through it. What is the story I'm telling myself about this? To ask it of someone else or to ask it of yourself, then we can begin to, I'm telling myself a story. It's happening because I'm not good enough. And is that true? No, actually half the department is getting laid off because they lost half their business. Right. It's really sad and unfortunate, and it's appropriate to feel angry and upset about that. But this has nothing to do with you being good enough or not.
This is one of the primary things I learned from Buddhism. They call it Shempa, the hook that you get. So there's that initial energetic impulse in the body, anger, fear, jealousy, whatever. But then there's the Shenpa, which is the hook that starts spinning you into the story. And that's where the suffering is. We usually don't know that that's happening. I mean, it's fast and it's very subconscious. So as you know, because we talked a lot about this while I was going through it, my stories around romantic relationships and what I would perceive as rejection from someone, and the almost instantaneous spiral that would happen inside of me because of all these stories that I didn't even realize that I had them. It just feels like torture. It just feels like pain. It feels like being annihilated. That's what it felt like to me.
But it also feels like truth though, right? It feels like it's a fact.
No, it feels like fact, and it's so intense. And obviously trauma really plays a part in this because it can send you right into that state even more quickly. I've had that feeling where you're swallowed up into it, you're in the hole, you're gone. And so would you say that the first step is just knowing that there are stories, like there might be a story in here and actually the story is causing you suffering?
I really like what you said about the Buddhist, the hook. When we ask ourselves that question, what is the story I'm telling myself? And we can begin to see the bullshit. But sometimes when someone holds a mirror up and it collapses quite easily. We can sometimes see like, oh God, how ridiculous. Of course, blah, blah, blah. But they're so seductive. It's kind of fascinating how our brains work that way.
I love that you say they're seductive because there's this vision of like the siren, this come here. And before you know it, you're being pulled, like this gravitational force is pulling you in this direction. And it's always very familiar.
The familiar is the seduction because the familiarity is very comfortable. I think that a lot of the weight of the seduction is in the familiar. The most obvious way for everybody is in romantic relationships. That's where it's most pronounced. But you're right, it happens in friendships and all sorts of different things as well. It's all the thing is, it's all about patterns. I remember there was a meme on Facebook. I saw it recently where someone posted, it's like, I don't care what you say or what you do. What's the pattern? Like, what's the pattern? And that's like, as a therapist, it's like, there's always a pattern. When I've had clients like with the philandering husband, she'll say, what, he's promised, he's sworn on the Bible, he's started exercising, he's had 2 sessions with his therapist. I know it's different. I'm like, and what's the pattern? Because this has happened before, right? About every 9 months he promises and does like 3 weeks of intense activity on something. But what's the pattern? The pattern in everyone's behavior will tell you everything you need to know.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm the executive producer of Tell Me Something True, and I co-created the show with Laura. We built TMST and our online community with the hope of creating a sane spot on the internet. We're really passionate about the ad-free nature of this work. Our belief is that this project will work best if we're not hustling to keep advertisers happy, and we keep our attention on you, the TMST community. And this is where you can play a major role. TMST Plus is the membership group that helps to keep this podcast going. Whether it's through a monthly membership or a one-time contribution, TMST Plus members are vital to this experiment. As a TMST Plus member, you get to join Laura for member-only events, send in questions for the guests, hear the complete unedited interviews, and connect with other TMST community members. Sometimes we feel like we can't make a difference in the world. With a TMST Plus membership, you can be keeping this space alive and thriving for a one-time gift or for as little as $10 a month. You can find the link in the show description, and then please head over to tmstpod.com right now to support the show. And thanks.
So we're saying that there are patterns, and then we're saying also that people can change, that they can change. So
yeah.
What's the difference? What happens for people that are able to change?
So, which is emotional sobriety is it's Johari's window. It's that we have expanded the corner that is known to others. But I think there's some key things to emotional sobriety. And this is, for me personally, what changed my life is these are the key elements to it. Is you, and Brené Brown's work demonstrates this. And she said it many times, you have to have cast iron boundaries in order to be happy and successful. You cannot be you just cannot be happy unless you have good boundaries. So we have to specifically learn how to have boundaries and go through the process of applying them, which can be messy and a bit scary and all those kind of things. We have to be able to deal with our resentments, which is what's key to that is the resentment work is key, is that's what shifts our perception that what other people do is personal. We have to be able to change our limiting beliefs, which is the story that we tell ourselves. And this is work that all human beings have to do. All human beings are called to this work. It's just most people don't answer the call. But when you have a substance abuse problem, it forces you. It kind of, your back's against the wall, and this is laid out in front of you in many different ways that it's not just stopping drinking, you're going to have to do some work, which is why we are the luckiest.
Okay, I love that you say that. I always love when you say that this is work that all people have to do. Back to, let's just go a little bit deeper in each of those. So boundaries, without having a whole discussion on boundaries. I think a lot of people think that boundaries are going to keep people further away. And if I have boundaries, I'm going to ruin my relationships. So what do you say to that?
Okay, so that's so in my book, I write about the 5 pillars of sobriety. One of them is balance. And actually, balance and boundaries go hand in hand. And you can't have one without the other. So keeping other people away, or that's not a boundary. That isn't. But look, I come across people every so often who say, "Oh, I've got really, really good boundaries." They don't. What they have is a steel wall with barbed wire fence around themselves. That's not a boundary.
Right.
So boundaries just keep the good in and the bad out. They manage my energy and they improve all of my relationships. Like I am so appreciative of people with really good boundaries. Like me too. I love a no. I'm really happy with a no. Really happy, because then I know where I stand. I can move on and get on to plan B. What I cannot stand is a wishy-washy yes, because I kind of suspect it's a wishy-washy yes, and I'm not sure if you're going to do the thing, or maybe you will, maybe you won't, or don't give me that bullshit. So boundaries and balance go hand in hand. And balance is about balancing our needs, which we're all trying to meet our needs. And when our circumstances change, as they will, how we manage and meet our needs is going to change. We have to have both of those things at the same time. So what you were describing that's not a boundary. Boundaries are good for everybody, and they are nurturing for relationships, and they benefit us and they benefit everybody else around us. And I always say to my clients, if you do one piece of work, like just one thing, we'll just work on your boundaries, that it will revolutionize your life.
Well, you can't really work on boundaries without working on everything else that you're talking about, because it touches everything. If you run into a place where you're stuck with a certain relationship where you feel very trampled on, you have a resentment, say, you're taking it all personally, you're already touching on resentments. I can see why you would recommend boundaries, because they touch everything. It's impossible to work on boundaries and not know more about yourself, not have a lot of inquiry about, what do I want? I mean, that's what is underneath. What do I want and what do I need, right?
What the hardest thing that any human being has to do is deal with other people. Dealing with other people is just hard, right? And we need tools to deal with other people, because other people show up in the world based on their history, their story, their trauma, their limiting beliefs, blah, 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 and that comes out in their behavior and in their patterns. Dealing with other people is the biggest life challenge, I think, that any of us face. So, for example, going back to something we were saying earlier, I was raised, and maybe you were as well, like, as a woman, don't make a fuss. My feelings aren't important. That doesn't matter. What other people think of you is the most important. Those were the things I absorbed. Behaving on those belief systems was really damaging to me.
Now that I have good boundaries in my life, and it took years, I really don't have patterns of relational trouble. I have things that come up here and things that come up there, but it's much more peaceful. So has that been your experience?
Yeah.
And is that your experience with other emotionally sober people?
Yeah, you're right. Boundaries, it will transform all of our relationships. It's amazing. So resentments are the story that we tell ourselves about what we think was done to us. I call resentments the free drunk. So
the free drink?
The free drunk.
The free drunk. Oh, God. Yeah.
The free drunk. And this is why in the big book of AA, it talks about resentments being the number one offender. I don't think a truer word has been said. They are the free drunk. So on Monday, my boss really says or does something that makes me really angry and resentful. And I spend all week having that rent space in my head. I'm going over in that conversation. I'm planning revenge. I'm just like, that's when we know when we have a resentment, is it rent space in our head and we're planning revenge. And then it gets to Friday and I've been sober 6 weeks, 3 months, whatever. I don't want to drink. And I've had an awful week. My boss has been awful. This terrible thing that they said to me. And then on Friday night, someone says, do you want to go to cocktail hour? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I will have a cocktail because I freaking deserve, I freaking deserve it. Like, I have had a terrible week. People have been terrible to me and it's not fair. It is not fair. I'm a really lovely person and I try really hard and nobody sees that. And I'm telling, and I have 7 cocktails and you know what? None of that's my fault. That is not my fault. That's what the reason I had 7 cocktails and got drunk is because of what my boss said on Monday. So resentments are the fuel to a free drunk. And that's why they're so crucial for sober people to get to, there's some specific skills to deal with resentments. Such freedom, because it's all about what we rent space to in our minds. I have far more interesting things to think about than what my boss said on Monday.
I know, but no, that is when you were describing, what resentments feel like and how we know we have them. I cringed a little because I know it's like the easiest thing to do, to blame someone. We don't have to look at ourselves. We don't have to take responsibility and so on. The free drunk. Yeah, it is very intoxicating. Talk about seductive.
And resentments are very seductive because they allow me to have my blame story. And they also keep us stuck because there's no growth there. It's just, she did this, he did that. And what we do is we co-opt other people into it, right? Like, well, what did your boss say? Well, let me tell you. And I go into the whole story and everyone's like, oh, and that kind of like fuels it. We're all fueling it. And I'm like feeling more, it's the seduction
that righteous
of
anger.
Self-righteous anger. It's so seductive. It's a weird feeling. We want it, but it doesn't feel good, but we want it. It's really
it feels better
strange.
than feeling whatever it is that I think whatever's behind it in the moment. I think that's what it is. It's a lot easier to be angry than to be sad, to admit that we're afraid, that we're not going to get what we want.
Yeah. One of the methods I teach people in my programs to deal with resentment is based on rational emotive behavioral therapy, REBT. And the way that it processes, one of my clients calls it the resentment grinder. It's like a sausage grinder, like you put it in and out the other end, something else comes out. And it's very tied to the limiting beliefs. Resentments are very tied to the limiting beliefs in the story that we tell ourselves. There's a strong relationship there. And it's like, it's easier for me to just have my story. It's easier if you change. It's easier if you're wrong and you apologize or change or whatever, then everything would be fine. Resentments are also based on, I just want everybody to be the way I want them to be. Like, don't you all see how much happier it would be if you did things the way I want them to be done and you said what I want them to be said? And the funniest thing about resentments is, and this is very common, and this is such a massive shift in perception, is we have reoccurring resentments against people we know very well. And we know how they are. We know their patterns. We know how they show up. We know how they're going to behave in most situations. Yet we wake up and we think today they'll be completely reasonable and sane, and they will say the right thing and do the right thing. And then we're angry and resentful at them, despite knowing them for decades and knowing that they're always going to say or respond in this way. And they're not capable of giving us what we need. Yet freedom really came for me when I began to see, so for example, with my relationship with my mother, I would be constantly resentful and angry at her because today she didn't become an appropriate, sane, reasonable person.
Right.
When I was able to just accept that's how she is and I know how she's going to behave and I'm not, my whole life changed. It was incredible. That's kind of, and that's where they're quite amusing. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is crazy.
I know, it seems so obvious when you say it like that. But it's almost like we're waiting for them to do the thing that we know they're actually going to do so that we can keep our story.
But they're self-serving because that's what
I mean.
What we get from that is then I am justified in drinking, doing drugs, spending money I don't have, overeating, whatever it is. I am justifying. That's the paradox of them, is that I don't want to shift this dynamic because they justify me in my behavior. I can keep doing this thing because it's not my fault.
My number one hint that I'm getting, I'm going in a bad direction, an unhealthy direction, is when I start nursing a resentment about someone or something. Because it can get you to a place of causing such pain that it does require relief, right? Eventually it does require some kind of relief. Not just that it's, annoying. It's actually quite painful.
Just one last thing about that is, what it comes down to is I can't change other people. I have to have the ability to feel better about myself, regardless of what anyone does or doesn't do. And that's the key to freedom, is I get to choose my response. I can't, I get to choose my response to this so I can feel okay.
Yeah. And that's something you talk about a lot. And it was actually one of my questions coming up is emotional sobriety. I believe you might not have said these exact words, but you talk about it as being responsible for your experience. And that, what you just said, owning really your own peace, your own freedom, your own happiness, your own well-being, despite what goes on around you or what comes at you or who acts in what way, is being responsible for your experience. What else does it mean?
It means, being emotional sobriety is about being responsible for the experience that I want to have. And I want to say there's a caveat to that, because it depends on how much privilege we have, for sure.
Yes.
That differs for everybody. But it's that, lots of people come into sobriety with some very bad and dysfunctional relationships. And the belief system that if those people changed, they would feel better. And it's the other way around. We actually have the tools. The personal development work is the tools so that boundaries, dealing with resentments, limiting beliefs, when I do that work, I feel comfortable in my own skin. And then what happens is when things bounce off me, it's not very often, every so often I get a resentment and I need to kind of look at it. But after doing this for 2 decades, I really don't interpret other people's behavior personally very often. I just don't have that sensitivity anymore. And that's why I'm comfortable in my own skin. And that's the destination. There's nothing better in the whole world than that feeling. Yeah. I wouldn't give this up for anything.
One of the things in your book, one of the 5 pillars is process. Can you talk about why that's a pillar, why that's one of the most important things, what process is, and is it internal, external, both?
Everything is process. We are always in processes. So process work is really understanding our patterns and understanding how we were formed, why we became, why do I have these feelings? Why do I have these experiences? Why do I feel that way when X, Y, and Z happens? It's understanding that because our past shows up in our present every single day. And some of that is unhelpful and we can change it. And we change it through process work. And process, it really means it's not like we have a conversation and you're enlightened and everything changed. It's like it happens by inches. It's like, like we were saying about when I first heard the word emotional sobriety, I was like, I had this physical, like I had fear, but I also had intrigue. And, and it took years to understand fully what that meant and blah, blah, blah. So it's just layers. Process is just going through the layers. It's healing our past. It's getting to a place of peace and acceptance so that I don't carry this burden around with me. And everybody has to do process work because everybody has to understand themselves. I think it's one of the Greek philosophers, I can't remember which one, maybe Plato, that says something like, a life lived unexamined is not a life worth living. And it's really about observing ourselves with curiosity, not judgment.
It's the examination. That's what you're talking about. This sort of commitment to examining the ongoing, never-ending curiosity of why we are the way we are, how we can undo things that aren't helpful.
Process work is inextricably linked to growth. And growth is the reward. It's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for doing all of this work in the first place. I fairly early on made the connection with, when you get sober, and I had to learn how to have boundaries, and I was doing some journaling and step work and blah, blah, blah. It felt like work, and it didn't, I
feels
kind
hard,
of thought, I kind of felt like it was necessary. But I very quickly saw a connection between things sort of shifted and my life improved in ways that were very tangible. And I saw that connection with when I put some effort into this, some really good stuff happens for me, and I'm all about the good stuff. So
I want to ask about your book, though, because this will air shortly before it's out. It's time. It's coming out January 25th. Yeah,
January 25th. What I wanted to do was provide the how for people. It's a book written by a therapist, but I hope in a way that's really easy to understand. And it really mostly lays out a program, the 5 pillars of sobriety. And it's basically do these things. You will be able to stop drinking. Alcohol will no longer be an issue. And your life, and it's not just about it, that's the 10%. The 90% is, and you will expand your life. You will be comfortable in your own skin. You will be able to it's personal development work. And it's broken that down into these 5 pillars so that people can practice. There's a little bit at the beginning about changing our perception of what alcohol is and talk a little bit about the mummy needs wine culture and that kind of stuff. But it's really, I wanted people to have I see lots of people like, I'm sober, but now what? I don't, I'm sort of floundering a bit. I don't understand why I feel. It's the how. So it's a program and it can stand alone or it can accompany, if you're in the 12 steps or Women for Sobriety or whatever. It's really the therapeutic work. And there's lots of journaling prompts through it to help you kind of understand, and shift perception and all that kind of thing.
It's really, really well done. I think it's very hard to create a book like yours and have it be as engaging as yours is. And I think that's just, like I said, your publisher did a great job of letting your voice come through. And so it is very accessible and for anyone. It's really for anyone. That's also what I like. It's not, it feels modern, but also rooted in just ancient wisdom and what we understand about modern science and trauma and psychology.
Yeah, lots of people said that. It really is a personal development book for anybody. You know, if you're just getting started, there's stuff to just get started with. If you want to go deeper, there's stuff for that as well. So I'm really pleased with it. I'm always amazed that I can write anything that's semi-intelligent, because writing is really hard for me.
So it's called Soberful.
Soberful. Uncover a sustainable, fulfilling life free of alcohol.
And everyone go out and buy our book. Where can people find you?
You can find me at soberful.com. On Facebook, I have a group, Soberful. If you just Google my name, Veronica Valli, you can find out more information there.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you want more TMST, head on over to tmstpod.com and become a member. Members get access to the full uncut versions of these conversations, previews of upcoming guests, invites to join me for members-only events, and access to our members-only community where I hang out a lot, especially now that I'm not on social media. We decided from the beginning to make this an independent project. We don't have sponsors and we don't run ads. This means that we can make the show all about you and not what our sponsors or advertisers want. But it also means we're 100% reliant on your support. So my request and my invitation is simple. Support the show by becoming a member, or you can simply make a one-time donation of as little as $5. I cannot stress this enough. You can make a huge difference for as little as $5. Please head over to tmstpod.com right now. Tell Me Something True is engineered and mixed by Paul Chufo. Michael Elsesser and I dreamed up this show, and we're looking forward to joining you online and next time on Tell Me Something True.